Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a great webinar on tap, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the presentation, you will have the opportunity to access it later on. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for our speaker, please don't wait, don't hesitate, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions, and we'll try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. Also happening at the end of today's webinar, we will be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is how LivePerson takes cloud-native DevSecOps to the next level. Our speaker today is Koren, who is the DevOps CI/CD manager at LivePerson Israel. Nir, thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I know you have a great presentation on tap, so I'm going to put myself on mute and let you dive right on in.
Okay, so I'll start. Thank you for joining my session. And I'm going to talk about how do we run DevSecOps in our CI/CD. If you have no idea what is CI/CD, so don't worry about it. We will make an alignment. So in general, I'm going to touch in 2 different topics. So the first one is how do we run scans as part of our DevSecOps culture. And the other topic is how do we manage secrets and Kubernetes using the Vault, which is also part of our DevSecOps. So anyway, I'm Koren. I'm leading the CI/CD at LivePerson, and mainly I'm implementing DevOps for more than 10 years. You have my details over here. If you want to contact, if you want to ask question or something, just feel free to connect. So a little bit about LivePerson. So we power the AI. So mainly we're dealing with the workforce, at-home workforce. So mainly we're dealing with conversational AI and messaging. Our product is mainly chats, when you can chat with your credit card issuer or with your bank and so on. But behind the scenes, there are a lot of AI and a lot of insights. But this is not the topic of the presentation. If you want to learn more about LivePerson, just feel free to go to liveperson.com. So a little bit about the company. I will introduce the company. I will introduce the production. It's very important in order to understand exactly why did we implement the processes that I'm going to talk about it today. So mainly LivePerson, it's from 95 and it's public on NASDAQ in 2000. We have around 20,000 worldwide customers and more than 1,200 employees worldwide. We are actually 100% software as a service cloud company. We do not have on-premise products and so on. And our headquarters it's in Manhattan, in New York, and we have 18 offices all over the world. However, due to the COVID, everyone are working from home permanently, and that means that we have no offices anymore, and we won't work at offices. This is the plan currently. So we moved to work from home permanently. So this is the current setup at LivePerson, and it's going to stay after also in the post-COVID. So let's talk a little bit about numbers. Numbers, it's one of the most interesting slides mainly. So we have 7 worldwide data centers. We are not using public cloud. Our cloud is mainly private. We have 12K of servers, both virtual and physical. And on top of Kubernetes cluster, we're using 40 Kubernetes clusters with 800 Kubernetes nodes that runs actually 12K of pods, of active production pods. And we have also our main product. It's a single product in the customer-facing aspects. However, we have microservices architecture, so we're using 320 Kubernetes microservices and almost 100 legacy of Puppet-based microservices that they are in part of transition to the microservice of Kubernetes, but not all of them going to be there. And in terms of CI and deployment, we are using 25K of weekly builds on TeamCity and Jenkins, and 500 weekly deployment to production. So we are pretty massive. We have a massive traffic on the production, and our product is based on almost 5,000 GitHub repositories, both code repositories and technical repositories. So our actually data center maps, it's currently on 3 main areas in the US, in Virginia and in Auckland, and we have it also in Europe, in London and Amsterdam, and we have a small data center in Tel Aviv, and also in APAC we're using Sydney and Melbourne. So each region, it's actually active and passive data center. So let's make short alignment about what is CI, what is continuous integration. This is a definition from Martin Fowler, one of the main DevOps advocates. A lot of articles of Martin Fowler's in the internet. So actually CI, it's actually a key software development practice where members of each team can integrate their work frequently. And that means that any change that you will put on the source control will actually have a short cycle of build, deployment, test, and so on, and scans, of course, and security scans and whatever you want to put inside the CI process. But finally, after a reasonable short time, you will get an answer, you will get a feedback about the status. And what is a CI/CD? When we talk about CI and CD, what is CD? So when we say CD, there are 2 meanings of it. One of them is continuous deployment, and the other one is continuous delivery. And the main difference between continuous deployment to continuous delivery is that we have the automatic cycle of build, deployment, test, and so on, and finally we have deployment to production. However, in continuous deployment, we're using automatic deployment to production, and on continuous delivery, the production is being deployed by a button click, by a human, by a reviewer or something, and that means that in continuous delivery, you will always have something to provide to the production. Okay, let's talk a little bit about our CI process. So if we are looking from left to right, the developer is actually developing in Java or Node.js or whatever. It doesn't really matter because the processes of the CI are pretty the same. So actually, So we are using GitHub Enterprise and TeamCity as our main CI system, but we also use the Jenkins. So as soon as the developer pushes something to the GitHub, the TeamCity will initiate the unified process of the build. And I'm reminding you, we are running 25,000 weekly jobs, and most of them are builds. So when we are running the build, the artifacts are being deployed to the Artifactory, whatever, if it's a Java, jars, or Node.js packages and so on. The Docker images are being uploaded to the Harbor, and Harbor is actually a Docker registry, a free Docker registry, open source from VMware. And finally, we are deploying our stuff to the Kubernetes cluster at CI. And at the end, we have tests and scans. So I will elaborate about the test and the scans after it. But anyway, we are running the test, whatever the developer chooses, it doesn't really matter. We don't really care about the technology, how do we run tests. However, we are running scans, 3 main scans. One of them, it's the white source. And this is a static code scans for dependencies and for open source that the developers is being used. The other scan is SonarQube, which is the static code analysis for code quality. We just want to make sure that the code is qualified enough and we don't have any potential bugs, and this is an open source. And we are using also the check marks, which is a static code analysis for security. And these scans, we're actually scanning the code itself to make sure that we don't have some security bugs, potential bugs like cross-site scripting, SQL injections, and so on. Finally, when everything is scanned and the status of the build is green, we are able to deploy to production using our own tools, as everything is being monitored by the normal common tools in the market. And of course, everything is being exposed and monitored through the ELK stack in production, pretty similar to any other structure of CI. So mainly, I'm going to be focusing on the scans, mainly on the white source, obviously. And I will talk about exactly what did we solve with the white source and how did we do it. Before it, I would like to talk a little bit about our CD, because part of our services, actually a significant part, almost 100 services, are actually running on continuous deployment. And that means that any service that want to run on continuous deployment, which is fully automated cycle, so we have a dedicated branch that the developer is choose. Let's say it choose to the master, and any commit to the master branch on the service repository will start the CI cycle normally, but in release mode. That means that we are signing the version, and finally we are deploying to the QA cluster and to the pre-staging cluster and the staging and so on, and finally we'll be reaching to production. We are still not reaching to production in terms of customers' contracts and so on, but we're going to be there soon. It's not a technical issue, it's a legal issue. But anyway, between each environment, we have an automation test that runs on top of the environment, and just want to make sure that we're not doing anything wrong and we're not breaking the entire cycle. And those automation tests are running on internal legacy proprietary system that we wrote. But actually, in case the automation test as a post-deployment didn't pass, so we just stopped the cycle and we won't continue to the next level, obviously. So actually, our developers are the one that owns the entire process from the IDE to production, and actually they are actually the one that press the deployment to production. There is no deployment team. There is no specific gate to the production. The developers has their own access to the production in terms of course, a lot of tools that keeping them from making mistakes. I want to talk a little bit about our architecture. So we're using microservices. So that means that we have a single product, but in fact we have 300 products. And I always like to provide the example of the pasta dish. So when we are looking at the pasta, or we're looking at the cheese or the pasta or the tomatoes on the onion, and this is the monolith like the microservice. So in case we have a monolith, there are a lot of advantages and disadvantages. I'm not going to talk about it, but anyway, we are using microservices. So this is the reason we scan any microservices independently. And every microservice, each one actually has its own code repositories and code review rules and lifecycle and rules of deployment and environments and servers and etc. And finally, each microservices expose the needed API to the other microservices, and this is the way they can connect each other. But this is not the topic of the presentation. I just want to emphasize exactly the structure in order to understand why did we implement the processes that I'm going to talk about it. And this is a very nice tweak that I like. So we replaced our monolith with microservices so that every outage could be more like a murder mystery. And of course, it's funny, but anyway, if you don't have a too complex environment to manage as a monolith, don't ever consider microservices. And this is also something that Martin Fowler, the one who wrote the definition of what is CI and CD, but that's it for now. So for our main topic, why do we enforce security scan? So, and how do we enforce the security scan? This is part of our DevSecOps. So actually, we are trying to enforce a corporate governance, and that makes sense We don't want to release any microservice in case we have almost 400 microservices. We don't want to release something with the, I don't know, with legal issues or with the security issues. So we're trying to make sure that the developers cannot comment or remove the important task. In case we have something around, I don't know, Maven plugin or something like this, a developer can easily mark it and we won't be able to know about it. So we want to make sure that the developers won't be able to comment it, and we just want to make sure that finally we are not violating security standards and of course legal standards, and of course this is part of our quality standards. So as I mentioned previously, we're running SonarQube, checkmarks, and white source, and both white source and checkmarks are security scans tools, which is commercial. The SonarQube is static code analysis tool, which is open source. We are using the open source version. But anyway, this is being scanned for any microservice that we're using in terms of the 400 microservices that we're using. And how do we do it? So first, any build from the 25,000 build that runs on a weekly basis, it's being analyzed, and then we get the decision, what do we have to run based on the build type. So that means that whatever we run on Jenkins or on TeamCity, each build we're checking exactly what type of build is it. Is it a normal CI process? Is it a nightly build and that contains probably more tests, or is it a release build? So in case we decided that it's a release build or schedule build, we will run the code scans. And how do we do it? So I'm going to talk a little bit about Maven extension. Normally, when I talk about it in conferences, the main question is how many of you are familiar with Maven? So anyway, if you're not familiar with Maven, this is one of the most popular framework to build Java code. So actually, we are just extend the Maven by writing a Maven extension. And that means that we are just writing a small jar, and this jar exchange the Maven library. And that means we are able to identify exactly I don't know when Maven session started, Maven session ended, and so on. And anytime we identified something, we can do something. And in this case, we can just call the white source scan, call the SonarQube scan, and so on. So it's very easy, especially if you're a Java developer. But anyway, we're identifying the extension type when the session ended or succeeded or failed. And in case the build ended with a success, then we can trigger something. This jar, it's actually part of the Maven library. When we put it on the build agent itself on the Maven OM libx, anytime this jar will listen to any Maven event. And in this case, we're just, anytime we develop it or something like this, we're just distributing it to the libx folder under the Maven OM, under each build agent. And in this case, we can ensure that the build itself will run the SonarQube and the white source, and the developers has nothing to do with it. And finally, if we have any violations, we can break the build, provide the feedback to the developer, and I will talk about it in a minute. And in this case, the developer will be able to fix it and re-trigger the release again. And finally, when it's green, it will be able to proceed to the production. We're doing it the same also for the Node.js build. We have an internal library of LP Node CI that you must use it. And in case you're not using it, you won't be able to release anything at LivePerson. But in this case, also we are identify the build type. And in case we have a normal release build, we will trigger the white source and the SonarQube scan just to make sure that you won't be able to miss it. Finally, at the scan, the main problem, I think the main problem if you're using code scan tools, if you're using a code scan tools, the main problem is how do we read the report? So mainly the developers have no idea how to read it, what what did they do wrong? Because normally we get a lot of alerts from dependencies of dependencies of dependencies, and this is not a straightforward, and this is not always the developer's fault. So how do we read it? So in general, code scan report might contains a lot of too much information. So what do I violate? Where did it come from? This is a very common question for developers. Why do I care about the scans? Why did I do it? I didn't even know. I didn't even choose this binary and so on. So we just wanted to make the report more user-friendly for the developers, because normally the developers won't log in to any dashboard and search for the tools and search for the source of violations. So in case we are using the white source, so we are analyzing, we're using the Jar file in order to scan our project, whatever it's Java or Node.js. So we are analyzing the folder of white source, policy rejection summary JSON file. This file is being generated during the scan. And also there is another file that's called check policy JSON txt, which contains the dependent sources. So we draw everything to the users. And finally, this is in case you're using a TeamCity. So this is the TeamCity UI. So actually we are able to write build is fine, but you have 4 white source violations detected. That means that you have nothing wrong in the code, but you are using a violation, you're using libraries that have violations. So we are able to print it as part of the TeamCity stuff. And finally, we are able to add a different tab as a white source report. So if we have a failure of white source, we are generating the white source report tab as part of our TeamCity build. And under the white source, we are generated the report, which is clean. We are aggregating all issues per type and make it much more easier for the developer to understand. And in this case, we have, I don't know, in this example, we have a known license. So this is all the libraries that have a known license. We have high security violation. So all issues with high security violations will be over here. And this is, of course, it's hyperlink to the white source report directly to the specific dependency. So if you want to get more information, all you have to do is just click it and see exactly what is your problem in case you don't understand it. But in most cases, developers know exactly how to proceed from that point. How do we make it more user-friendly? We also print everything in the console logs. And for the developers who like the console log, exactly same. We are aggregating all issues in the console, and everything is being printed. If you want to get more info about a known license of this binary, for example, you have the hyperlink. So all you have to do is just click it and exactly see where is your problem directly in the white source dashboard. So actually, the main goal is to mute the noise from the developer, and this is exactly how did we do it in the report itself, and of course in the enforcement of the scans. So in this case, if you're running service at LivePerson, you don't have to worry about scans. You don't have to deal with scans. We will scan it for you if you want it, or if you don't want it, we will scan it anyway. And we will make sure that you will get the most easiest and simple, as much as we can, a simple report, just to make sure that you understand exactly what is the problem. And in case you don't, you have no idea what is the problem, you have linked directly to the specific violation at the white source dashboard. Okay, the other topics that I want to talk about is the secrets and config maps trees. And again, this is the question that I have to ask the audience: how many of you are using Kubernetes? So those of you that are not using Kubernetes, just forgive me, it will take a few minutes. So anyway, we're managing the secrets and the config maps in a dynamic way that we can control it in a tree, and I will show you exactly how to manage it. So anyway, any of the services that we have based on the Kubernetes has their own config maps and secret YAML files. And in order to control exactly on which environment, which secret and which config map is relevant to which environment, we're simply using the GitHub as a tree. This is actually a private repository at GitHub, at our internal GitHub. So we're using a tree like dev and the area and so on, and finally the environment. So if I'm running a deployment to QA, in this example of the service name LPAC web, so I will search from the tree and I will take exactly the resources from this folder. So actually I'm just searching the GitHub tree and take the resources from the folder. And in this case, we have, for example, dev and production. So in this case, if my app is under the CI and I'm deploying something to the CI, the deployment engine will take the secrets from this folder and also from this folder, which is actually secrets for both CI and QA. Same goes for production. If I'm deploying, for instance, something to Virginia, and I have something that's specifically for Virginia for my app, so it will be under this tree. And if I have something that's relevant for the entire data center, I will put it here. So the deployment engine always go from bottom up, always search from bottom up, and will collect any secret that is relevant until it finished the tree at the root tree, and then it will collect everything and deploy it. So in this case, we are recursively bottom-up search in the GitHub tree for each deployment tool. And this example, when you see here, my app, it actually will collect both secrets because one of them it's relevant for the entire CI and QA, and the other one it's relevant only for the QA environment. But the question is, of course, secrets are actually contains username and password and so on, and it doesn't make sense to put username and passwords on the GitHub, especially not for production. So how do we use it? We're using the Vault, the HashiCorp Vault, and in this case, the Vault it's installed inside our network in the most secure way, like the Vault is being installed, and the deployment engine itself collect the secrets. But this is how the secret looks like. You see, there is no specific username and password, only path to the Vault. So in this case, we have key of the Vault. This is the key on Kubernetes. We have the path to the Vault and the key at Vault. So that means that during the deployment, if I want to take the Maven API key, I will go directly to the Vault, to this path, and look for this value. And during the deployment, I'm actually only on the deployment object, I'm replacing the value of this key with the real value from Vault. But this is only being modified in the object itself, not in the file. And in this reason, we don't care about it. You can steal our GitHub repository of the secrets. You won't be able to do anything with it because everything inside the secrets is being stored in the Vault itself and being translated during the deployment and only during the deployment. So the secret management, it's actually a simple and transparent way that we can easily provide an access to the developers, and they can easily choose exactly what they want for each environment. If I'm going back, so the developer can put under specific environment which secret or config map should be here, and it doesn't have to worry about anything that inside the secret, because everything it's being translated instantly during the deployment by the deployment tool from the Vault. Okay, thank you all. I think now it's the time for questions. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer.
All right, yes, we have plenty of time for questions here. If you do have a question, go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel, and let's go ahead and dive right into what we have right now. Let's see, first question, what is the workflow in case the build is failing due to policy violations? And what should be done by the developer?
Okay, so actually, it really depends. We actually provide more information in the report itself, but in case we have a security issue, we have failure due to a security issue, so all you have to do is just fix it. If you have no idea how to fix it and what is the problem exactly, you can consult easily directly with the security team, and they will help you to analyze it and understand it. In case you have any legal issue, so we have the legal department, and you can also consult with the legal department in case you don't know exactly how to solve it.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Next question. Can you please explain the last slide again? Looks like we had a little bit of confusion there.
Okay, let's go back to the last slide. I assume that we're talking about this slide, so I hope, right? Because
yeah, right.
okay, so actually imagine that this is a secret file of Kubernetes, and this is a secret file of Kubernetes. Normally the secret will contain key and value, username for the database and the username, password for the database and the password. So you don't want to put it on GitHub, because if you clone it and I stole your laptop, I will be able to log into the production. So in this case, all we have to do is just, instead of putting a real value of the username and the password, we're just putting a path to the vault. So in this case, there is no sensitive data inside the secret. However, during the deployment, we're loading the deployment object into the deployment as part of our deployment, and we are modifying exactly the value that is being taken from this specific path. And this path is actually path that's located in the vault. And the vault, it's actually a system that it's fully secured, and every password and everything that inside the organization is stored in the vault. So in this case, we are not holding a sensitive data in GitHub on the one hand, and on the other hand, we are able to provide secrets with real data on demand. I hope that it answered the question.
Okay, great. Yes, Jay said, yes, that's the slide he wanted you to go over, so yay. Okay, next question here. Can you talk about how you control vulnerabilities at the front of the pipeline, like through the use of Artifactory or another approved registry?
How do we use vulnerabilities? So mainly we're using, how do we enforce it? It's only as a post build. So in case you have vulnerabilities, we will let you build your stuff and you will be able to run the test and so on, but you won't be able to release it. Since we enforce the security scans only on release cycles, and that means that you can do whatever you want. You can hold inside your CI stuff, you can hold a lot of vulnerabilities. We don't care about it, but we do care if it goes to the customers. So in case you want to make sure that everything is fixed before you release your stuff, you have two choices. First of all, some of the developers are using the command line in order to scan it inside their development environment and fix everything they need. Some of the developers are simply release it, and if they have any issues, they fix it. It really depends on you. However, from our side, we will provide anything that we can. But in case you have any vulnerabilities, you won't be able to release, and if you don't able to release, you won't be able to proceed to production. We do work with the white source account manager in order to evaluate the tool that can scan as part of the IDE integration, and that means that during the deployment and during the development, you will be able to identify bugs.
All right, great. Okay, lots of time for questions, guys. So if you do have one, please don't be shy. Go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your question. Next one here is creating automatic pull requests for vulnerable libraries, breaking the build a good approach, given the upgrade, downgrade compatibility issues with other dependencies?
It's really hard for me to answer this question because first, as a part of our decision, we're not opening a pull request as automatic step. We always have something to review it, and we don't want to make a redundant noise in the system. Unfortunately, the code scanning tools contains a lot of false positives, and it's very hard. To identify it, and it doesn't really matter what kind of use that you're using. False positive are part of the big headache. So this is the reason we're not using an automatic pull request to open it. We just notify you, hey, you have a problem. Until you fix this problem, you will be able to live easily at the CI and QA, but if you want to move on to the production, you will have to fix the problem. And part of the issues, it's also by security team will have to, I don't know, add another rule or maybe ignore some specific libraries and so on. But it's very hard to identify what is the real issue and what is not. And this is the reason we are not using an automatic process.
All right, excellent. Okay, next question here. How do you maintain and make sure you are running on the latest white source CLI tool?
So first of all, we are working deeply with our account manager at WhiteSource, which is a great man. So anyway, in case he has something that is very relevant for me, he is notifying me, and we are actually run some tests and upgrade everything. And it's very easy for us because all build agents, we have something around 80, 90 build agents. Almost 100 build agents actually. So in a one button click, I can easily upgrade all stuff on all build agents easily. So in this case, we're just testing the stuff, and in case it works fine, we're just adding to the Puppet configuration management tool that we're build agents, and within a few minutes, it will be distributed to all build agents.
All right, great. Next question. We're getting some really great questions in here. What's the best approach for vulnerability management when it comes to dealing with container-specific SCA, in parentheses, white source vulnerabilities? As there are a lot of dependencies of containers, it's a challenge for remediation.
Yeah, so this is a very good question, by the way, whoever asked it. So this is, I think, one of the main problem that the developer says, okay, why do I care about a specific patch of OS of CentOS 7 or something? Why do I care? I don't know what is CentOS 7, and I don't know what is, I don't know, Ubuntu or whatever. I just writing a code. And this is one of the main problems that we have. And in this case, we're trying, I didn't talk about it actually, but we're providing a building block. So in this case, you're using, let's say you're using Docker and Kubernetes, and the base image is CentOS 7, for example. So we're not allowing you to use from CentOS 7 because we are taking the CentOS 7, running scans on the layers of the image, building everything that is needed, and finally we are making the perfect CentOS 7 with all fixes and with all the vulnerabilities that is being marked. And we are also adding our own LivePerson tools inside this image, and we say, hey, don't use CentOS 7, use LP CentOS 7, because LP CentOS 7, this is the CentOS 7 officially with all fixes and the layer of all fixes that we added on top of it. So in that case, you don't have to worry about layers that are not relevant for you. It's not perfect because sometimes we have a lot of glitches, and sometimes it's very hard for us to maintain it because we have no control about stuff that happens in the market. However, we're doing our best to remove the noise of the OS and the lower layers from you by using building blocks. I hope it answers your questions.
All right. Let's see. Next question then. Let's say we use external dependency A, which depends on B and C. If B and C are vulnerable, how can we proceed as we have control only on A?
Yeah, well, you guys have a lot of good questions. So in terms, we are talking about a build. If we are talking about the build, so we don't have to worry about it because the build itself, the scans, the white source scans of the build itself will scream about any issues that we have, both for my code and of course both for my dependencies. So in this case, I'm pretty covered. On a runtime, we are not using, currently we're not using an automated static code, an automated dynamic code analysis tools. We're evaluating some tools in the market, but we're not using it officially. But in case we will use it, we will be able to identify it. So anyway, we're trying to cover everything during the build, and since white source and checkmarks and so on, and SonarQube, of course, those are tools that are able to scan also the dependencies, so we don't worry about it. This is actually a Maven tree, for example, if you're using Java. So we're scanning the entire tree. So we are pretty covered in this area.
All right. Guys, there still some time left for questions. If you want to go ahead and submit one, I will keep the question and answer panel open in case anybody wants to send any more in. But while we're waiting to see if any other questions come in, I do want to remind the audience that today's event has been recorded or is being recorded. So if you miss any or all of the event, or if you just want to watch it again, you will have the opportunity to do so. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be living on the DevOps.com website, so you can always go find it there. You can just go to DevOps.com/webinars, look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. Okay, we do have one more question that came in. Could you share your top tips when using white source dashboard?
Okay, so I'll try to be gentle. Forgive me, Nama. So I really we really appreciate this product, and it's a really great product and great support and great guys and great developers, and we really love it. However, it's not that easy to navigate inside the dashboard. It's not always that easy. I know that they are doing a lot of effort in order to improve it, and we are working closely with our account manager and with our success manager to make sure that this UI will be much more easier. And I know that white source are doing a lot of stuff in order to improve it. So I think one of the best practice is exactly what we did. Just take the stuff that scans. You have all results in a JSON file. Just build a simple, stupid report and provide a stupid report to the developers. Just make it much more easier to read it. And this is exactly, I'm going back to the slide. So we took the informative dashboard and we just provide a simple report like this. So if you're looking at the screen right now, I think this is one of the main best practices in order to work with it. Just make sure that it's much user-friendly for the developers. As soon as it's user-friendly for the developers, they will use it. If you put something which is very complicated with not the best UI or not the best UX, they won't use it. Simple as that.
All right.
I hope it answers the question.
Okay, we've got one more question in. Is DevOps a prerequisite for implementing DevSecOps in an organization?
What are the prerequisites to implement DevSecOps? I think the first one is culture. I know it sounds very it's very unclear, but actually culture. That means that you think security, you work security, and security are part of your product, and security are part of your design, and they're part of the planning, and there are a lot of security angels inside the teams. So in case you have even security angels that they work closely with the security department and have the knowledge and have the tools and have the ability to influence the part of the code review or to influence as part of the design or the planning. I think this is part of the culture, and mainly I think this is DevOps is all about, if you ask me.
All right.
Culture.
All right. Yeah. So he was asking actually if DevOps itself is a prerequisite for implementing DevSecOps. So does a company need to actually have DevOps in place, or can they just dive right into DevSecOps?
Yeah, so what is DevOps? I mean, this is a very complicated question, because DevOps, is it a role? Is it a job of someone? Is it a culture? Is it what is DevOps? So when I think, let's say, for example, if you want to implement DevSecOps as part of the CI cycles, so you must have DevOps skills. You must know about CI, you must know about CD, you must know how to code it, how to integrate it, how to write and read from the API, for example. And in the same time, you have to understand exactly what is the CI cycle and what is the production deployment cycles and so on. So in one hand, yes, you must be a DevOps, but in case you're not a DevOps, what level of DevSecOps you want to approach? I mean, there are a lot of levels. There are just simple scanning, or maybe both static and analysis scanning for each build. It really depends how deep you want to go inside the DevSecOps.
All right, great. We keep getting those questions in, so we're just going to keep answering them, I guess. Here's the next one. Can we put more info in than we already have in JIRA tickets that are generated by white source? Currently, the library path is not being displayed in the JIRA ticket description. Also, sometimes the library path is not displayed. Why so?
I'm not sure I'm the one that is able to ask this question, because I'm not dealing with we're not integrating the white source stuff into the JIRA. However, as far as I know, JIRA, it's quite open platform. You can do whatever you want. You can read whatever you want from white source and write whatever you want to the JIRA. So it really depends on the integration you performed from the JIRA to the white source, but we have no experience with it.
Okay. Jay, just please know that the folks at White Source are going to be getting a copy of all the questions that came in. So I'm sure somebody from White Source will be more than happy to follow up with you to get your question answered.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Okay, great. So next question, how do you handle hot fixes or production bugs? And is there an integration manager to administer your source version control?
Yeah, so anyway, if you have in general in the CI process, we have something that you can easily build the stuff, and of course scanning and everything. So you can just creating a release, and if you have any issues with white source, for example, which is actually an important issue, it doesn't really matter. We won't let you to release it. We don't want you to put something with a security issue, or we don't want you to put something with a legal issue inside the production, whatever it's a new feature, bug fix, or hot fix. So it's pretty similar to the other stuff that we have. However, I didn't talk about it, but inside our CI, we have kind of a whitelist, and this is mainly for internal processes and internal services. For example, Maven plugins that we are using in order to run the build, or deployment tools, or internal tools, or whatever that we don't want to break the build in case of any issues that we have, because we don't care, because it doesn't go to our customers. So we have a whitelist that we can skip a specific project just to make specific demos and so on, just to make sure that we won't have redundant noise. I hope it answers the question.
All right. Next question. How can we include DAST as part of the pipeline security testing? DAST can be a wall for dev, but how to collaborate DAST with pipeline activities? Also, DAST aspects that are missing in the pipeline, what kind of DAST program can be initiated?
That's a I know about few tools. There are a lot of that's you mean by dynamic scan, as far as I understand.
Right.
So
Dynamic application security testing.
exactly. So I
Yeah.
think mainly I have an experience from the past with IBM AppScan, which is a dynamic scanning tool. However, it's very hard to scan it because normally it's not that easy to implement it inside the CI. And the main reason is that mainly desk tools are pretty long runs. So that means if you want to test a specific flow inside your application, let's say you have a web application and you want to run a desk scan, it mainly will take a lot of time, and it doesn't make sense to extend your build in 20 minutes more, for example, just to make sure that you will run it. So because CI, it's a fast feedback. If you don't have a fast feedback, you don't have a CI. But in this case, I would recommend to add it mainly maybe to release builds, or maybe enforce a nightly scan that runs on a nightly basis and scans everything, and whatever, you don't care if the build takes 1 or 2 hours, but you will get a report at the end of the build just to make sure that you don't have a specific issue that you need to fix. However, implementing DEST as part of the CI, it's not that easy, and I think there are not a lot of great tools, not something that I know about it, that can easily integrate and provide fast feedback, because this is a very complicated topic.
Okay. All right, great. Well, it looks like those are the questions that we have. I'll leave, as I said before, I'll leave the GoToWebinar question and answer panel open to see if we get any other last minute questions in. But while we're waiting, again, do want to remind the audience that today's event has been recorded. So as I said before, we are going to be sending out an email post-event that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. The webinar is also going to be living on the DevOps.com website, so you can find it there. Just go to webinars, DevOps.com/webinars, look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. All right, looks like we're not going to get any more questions in. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and shut it down as far as the question and answer period comes in, or it goes. If we get any more questions that come in, please know that the folks at WhiteSource, as I said before, are getting a copy of all the questions. So I'm sure they'll be more than happy to follow up with you to get your question answered. Okay, I did mention at the top of the hour, we'd be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So without further ado, let's go ahead and do that. Our first winner today is, let's see, Aaron J. Congratulations, Aaron. Our second winner today is Diana D. Congratulations, Diana. Third winner is Jim F. Congratulations, Jim. And our fourth and final winner today is, let's see, Luke W. Congratulations, Luke. We'll be following up with all 4 of you offline to get your Amazon gift card over to you by email. So check your inbox. If you don't see anything in your inbox, please check your spam folder. Nir, thank you so much for a great presentation. Lots of great information, lots of great questions from the audience. So thanks also to the audience for being such a great question presenter. So people, great stuff all the way around.
Thank
so
you very much. It was a pleasure for me also.
All right, great. Well, I guess it just leaves it for me to again thank the audience for joining me today. And this is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am signing off. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.